Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the statewide information and workshop session for the 2022 Individual Artist Awards. My name is Enzina Marari, and I'm a program officer here at the Rasmussen Foundation and have the good fortune of working on the Individual Artist Awards program. We are excited to share this virtual space with you this evening and look forward to the conversations that will follow. As we prepare to begin our program today, we'd like to acknowledge that here in Anchorage, we gather virtually on the homelands of the Dena'ina. We invite you to take a moment to reflect on the traditional lands you are living upon, and if you'd like to, introduce yourself in the chat and share where you are joining in from today. Before we get started in the program, let's take care of some virtual housekeeping. Please keep your mics muted. You are welcome to have your cameras on or off per your comfort, and feel free to use the Zoom reactions located at the bottom or top ribbon of your Zoom window. This session is being recorded and will be shared on our website for those who missed joining us live. And we encourage you to use the chat function to ask any questions that come up for you during the presentation or workshop sessions. This session is 90 minutes straight through, and we hope to have some time reserved at the end for a live Q&A. But if not, we will capture your questions in the chat and make sure that we get you a response. To access the chat, please select the text bubble icon in the ribbon. This will open up the chat window. You can start us off today by saying hello. Finally, we do have closed captions enabled, and those will appear as subtitles at the bottom of your window. If you would like to turn this feature on or off, you can do so by accessing either More or finding the tab that reads Show or Hide Subtitle and toggling whichever you prefer. Today for this presentation, I am joined by Rasmussen Foundation staff and consultants and statewide arts and culture partners. The foundation staff on the Zoom include Lisa Deemer, Emily Kwan, Rodney Hamilton, Julie Mason, Nicholas Conrad, and Karen Lowell. And folks, if you could just wave or smile or jump up and down and let folks know who you are, that's great. Thank you. I'd also like to take a moment to introduce our arts and cultures partners who we'll be working with just a little later on into the presentation. Today, we are joined by Adele Person and Brianna Allen from the Bunnell Street Art Center, Jaron Pelagio with Enlaces Alaska, Becky Kendall with the Anchorage Concert Association, Andrea Noble with the Alaska State Council on the Arts, Carrie Hahn with the Nome Arts Council, Dixie Cluck with Museums Alaska, Ciro and Liz Anaya with Anaya Latin Dance, Teal Francis with the Fairbanks Arts Association, and Hollis Mickey with the Anchorage Museum. These folks are doing fantastic work working within arts and culture and directly supporting artists in their communities. So we encourage you to reach out to them if you have any questions specific to your community. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Hollis Mickey to properly introduce herself and talk about a partnership that the foundation has with the Anchorage Museum, providing professional development to IAA award recipients. Hollis.
Thank you so much, Enzina. It's such a pleasure to get to greet everyone this evening in this virtual coming together from all across the state. I am so thrilled to be able to speak to the fabulous partnership and honored to be the facilitator of the partnership between the Rasmussen Foundation and the Anchorage Museum, supporting individual artist awardees. Through several years of development, we've created a multi-pronged approach to supporting artists who receive the Individual Artist Award in growing their practice. Because often after receiving such a remarkable and important, significant recognition, kind of thinking about what's next and how to continue to enrich and develop your career as at the heart of what we seek to try and support artists in doing. So this involves a series of workshops now spread out over the course of an entire year, so a sort of curriculum. They're provided online with recordings, so if you can't attend in person, as well as individual consultation that I provide with each award winner if they'd like to go over something like a future application for something else, brainstorm a project, or develop an idea, learn about residencies, etc. So as someone whose background comes from being a panelist on the Individual Artist Award panelist side, that was part of my story of coming to Alaska, and a practicing artist, it's a great honor for me to be able to help support you should you be a recipient. In the meantime, I also want to provide the museum as a resource and me as a resource. I'm glad to connect with you in your application process. Thank you so much, Enzina. I'll turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We've been so inspired by the work of the Anchorage Museum and the meaningful work that this professional development workshop series does with artists who've received these awards. And so this is a add-on to that monetary project award or fellowship that you all will be applying for, and we'll get to a little bit in just a little while. So before we start our program, I do want to root us in what we'll be going over today. And so we'll start with just a real brief overview of the Rasmussen Foundation and the Individual Artist Awards program. Then we'll jump into a walkthrough of the application portal and start talking about the different components of the application itself. So the Rasmussen Foundation is a grant-making philanthropic organization that began in 1955 and was created by Jenny Olson Rasmussen in honor of her late husband, E.A. Rasmussen. And both Jenny Olson and E.A. were immigrants to Alaska. They came from Sweden to Yakutat, Alaska, where Jenny Olson was a missionary and E.A. was a teacher. In Alaska, they have their son, Elmer Rasmussen, who went into the banking industry. And this is where much of his fortune was developed. And in his passing in 2000, he contributed his personal fortune to the Rasmussen Foundation. And that reflects much of our grant making today. When the foundation first began in the 50s, the first grant that was ever made by the foundation was for $250 to a church out in the valley for a projector. Years later, the foundation has contributed over $420 million to a variety of sectors across Alaska with the main mission of making life better for Alaskans. And so contributions are made across all sectors. We see it in health and education, social services, housing and homelessness, and of course, arts and culture. And arts and culture are integral to the Rasmussen Foundation and a Rasmussen Foundation family value. We see arts and culture investments being made in artists directly, like the Individual Artist Awards program, through organizations and the different grant-making programs that the foundation has, and throughout communities. And this investment started very early, even before the Individual Artist Awards program. This image is of the Alaska Heritage Museum that is housed now in the Wells Fargo building, which is the main building of the Rasmussen Foundation, a former National Bank of Alaska. And this was created by Elmer Rasmussen when he started to realize that tourists and folks outside of Alaska would come to Alaska, buy and take artwork, Alaska Native, Indigenous artwork rooted in Alaska, and take that outside of the state. He really felt that this work belonged to stay in Alaska. And so he would purchase this work directly from artists and created the Alaska Heritage Museum so that work would remain in Alaska where it was made. In 2004, the Foundation Board of Directors really wanted to examine how better to invest in arts and culture as a comprehensive strategy. And they decided that one of the best ways to invest broadly in arts and culture was to put money directly into the hands of artists. So as part of a comprehensive strategy to support arts and culture, the Individual Artist Awards was created. And it's important to note that the Individual Artist Awards is the only program at the foundation that funds individual artists. Every other program that the foundation oversees supports local nonprofits, tribal entities, or local governments. And so this is a really specialized program that's individually focused. And the main purpose of the Individual Artist Awards program is to provide artists with dedicated time and resources for serious artistic exploration and growth. And the overall impact of that not only strengthens our artist cohort and cultivates growing artists in Alaska, but it reinvests in Alaska's cultural resources. Since the program began in 2004, so this is our 18th year, the foundation has provided over 580 grants to artists from across the state, across many disciplines and career stages, representing 53 communities throughout Alaska. And there are 3 award types that the foundation recognizes in addition to that ongoing professional development that Hollis spoke about as we started off this presentation. So the Project Award is the first award that I'll share some information about, and this is a $7,500 award in addition to that professional development for a short-term project. And so these are project awards, they're artist recognitions, but they're also grants that have a period of time of completion. And for all of these awards, that grant period is 1 year. So it's a $7,500 award available to all career stages across all disciplines for a project that has a distinct beginning and end. We get lots of questions about what about ongoing projects or projects that are less than a year, and we can speak into detail about that. But as long as the project can occur within that year period of time, it would be acceptable. And there are 25 project awards given each year. Fellowships are a little bit of a more advanced award. These are $18,000 grants in addition to that professional development. And these are awarded to artists who are working at a mid-career or mature stage. So their practice is a little bit more developed. And fellowships are only awarded in select disciplines each year. So every year, the disciplines that are eligible for fellowships rotate, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And there are only 10 of the fellowships awarded each year. So it is even a little bit more competitive than the project awards. Our final award in the Individual Artist Award category is the Distinguished Artist. And we won't spend time talking about this today. The Distinguished Artist Award is a recognition of a mature artist who has dedicated their life to contributing to arts and culture in Alaska. And it is done in a separate process. It is an award that's done by nomination and reviewed by a separate panel. That review process is currently underway, and the nomination period for this year has closed. But we open that in the fall. And so we really encourage you to think about a mature artist in your communities that is really deserving of this award and consider nominating them this upcoming year for next year. We also get lots of questions of career stage and how do I identify what my career stage is? And so again, the foundation recognizes 3 career stages: emerging, mid-career, and mature. And I'll talk about emerging first. And so emerging artists are those who are really in the early stages of their professional practice as an artist. They do have a developed body of work, they have an established artistic voice and vision, and their work is beginning to take shape. So an emerging artist is an artist that is already rooted into their practice and maybe are just kind of in the early beginning stages of their career. The type of maker or artist that this program might not be a good match for is someone who is maybe not a practicing artist, but has an idea for an art piece or an art project, but doesn't really have a background in the arts. They may not be at a stage developed enough to apply for the award, but if they are early in their practice and already have a developed portfolio or voice or vision, they would be an emerging stage. Now, a mid-career artist are those who are a little bit more rooted, a little bit more advanced and moved along in their career. They have an independent body of work and a recognized contribution to their discipline in a variety of different ways. It could be through public presentation or engagement or publication or teaching experiences, but something that really roots them in their practice and contributes back to the community around them. And you can see a steady progression in their work. So you can follow the trajectory of their art making and see that there has been a progression, there has been a development. And although this artist has a unique voice, they are continuing to challenge and grow their practice. And the tricky thing with these career stages is that there aren't really specific milestones in terms of years invested. So it's really a unique process, and it's based on individual growth. And then finally, we also recognize a mature artist. And those are artists who are well established in their practice. They have a very extensive, developed, and mature body of work that references and represents lifelong investigation into their work. So these are artists that are recognized in their field as mature and master artists. Now, all three career stages are eligible and able to apply for a project award. And again, those are those short-term $7,500 awards, but only mid-career and mature are eligible to apply for a fellowship, that $18,000 project recognition. I also want to note the application period, which is open now. It opens every year in mid-December and it closes in March on March 1. So we're about 1 month out from that deadline. We also want to give a snapshot into what our application submissions actually look like and who's applying in what category. And so what we're seeing now are the applications we received last year in 2021. And you can see here, I won't go through them specifically, but we just want to be transparent about what disciplines are applying and what these numbers look like. And I do want to call attention to a couple of categories that typically and historically have a lower application turnout, like dance or choreography or performing arts or presentation interpretation. We will talk about disciplines in just a moment, but we want to recognize that we know that there are more than 2 fantastic dance artists working in Alaska. And so we really want to encourage these artists to apply and to reach out to us if you have any questions on your eligibility or what your project or proposal might be. You can also see here that some of the categories that receive the most submissions are in the visual arts, music, literary arts, and folk and traditional. And again, these are the project awards available across all disciplines and all career stages. And then a snapshot of our fellowship applications from last year. And again, these rotate. So about half of the disciplines are eligible 1 year and the other half will be eligible in the next. And so these were the disciplines that were eligible last year. Again, we see a low turnout in the dance and performance art and higher in literary, folk and traditional, and crafts. So just a bit about the disciplines that are recognized by the Rasmussen Foundation. We won't spend too much time defining each of these, but we advise you to review the guidelines that are available on our website, and we can post those in the chat so you can copy and paste. And those guidelines really specifically speak to the definition of each of these disciplines so you can identify where you sit and which discipline best defines your practice as an artist. And so the 11 disciplines that the foundation recognizes is choreography and dance, crafts, folk and traditional arts, literary arts and script works, performance arts, a multidiscipline category, music and music composition, new genre, presentation and interpretation, and visual arts. And as you can see here, of the 11 artistic disciplines that are eligible for project awards, there are 6 this year that are eligible for fellowships in addition to the project award, and that is media arts, multidiscipline, music, new genre, presentation, interpretation, and visual arts. So if you are an artist working in the other 5 categories, such as dance or folk and traditional arts, and you really want to apply for a fellowship, you may want to consider waiting until next year when those disciplines will be eligible. I do want to call attention to just a few of these disciplines that we receive some questions about every year. And those are performance arts, multidiscipline, and presentation interpretation. So multidiscipline is really for any practice that is rooted in more than one type of genre or discipline. So if you are an artist that illustrates your own literary compositions, you may want to consider applying as both a visual arts and you may want to consider applying as multidiscipline under both visual arts and literary arts. We also know that there's a lot of overlap between practice, and someone might work in crafts but identify as a visual artist. And so we really encourage you to pick the discipline that best represents your work. Now, with performing arts and presentation interpretation, I just want to share one distinction before we move on. And that is that performance art is art that is intended to and rooted in a live performance in front of an audience or staged for an audience or intended to be shown later virtually. And this is original work that is developed or written or scripted by the artist or performed. So the key in the performance arts category is that it is original work developed by the artist. With presentation interpretation, this is work that is existing in nature that is then reinterpreted by an artist or art group. So a clear example that we give is a theater company working on Shakespeare. It is an existing artwork. It's a written script already that is being reinterpreted. So those are the key differences, original versus existing. If you have specific questions on these disciplines and where you fit, you can go ahead and put those in the chat or reach out to us at arts@rasmussen.org and we'll get back to you. I also want to share a change that was made just a few years ago, so it's still relatively new. And this is the expansion of the program to include artist groups and collaboratives. Every year we evaluate the program and we really listen to your feedback. So we really encourage you to give us feedback on the program because we seriously take that into consideration as we're refreshing the program every year. So if you ever get a survey from us, please fill it out because we do take your feedback and your suggestions really seriously. And so a few years ago, we recognized that there was a significant group of makers and artists that were being left out of the project, of the individual artist awards. And those were artists that were working collaboratively or in groups. And we recognize that art making is intrinsically and naturally a collaborative process. And so a few years ago, we opened up the applications to recognize groups or collaboratives. And groups or collaboratives are eligible to apply for a project award or a fellowship and across any discipline, as long as it's an eligible discipline for the fellowship year. We recognize a group or a collaborative as any artists that are working together in a group of 2 or more. So 2 individuals working together in one application under our understanding for this process would be a group or collaborative. That group or collaborative could be ongoing. It could be a dance company that's been in practice for a decade, or it could be a group of multidisciplinary artists that come together for a time-based project and will dissolve after. One note about groups and collaboratives and the process in general is that if you are an artist that works individually and also works as a group, you can only submit 1 application. So that's something that you'll need to determine on your own is if you feel like you want to apply as an individual or as part of a group. And this goes across the board for individuals and groups, but applicants can only apply for either one project award or a fellowship. So 1 application per artist. I also want to speak to the eligibility and criteria of the award. We get lots of questions on who can apply and what the application, what the panelists are looking for. And so this is an Alaska-based program. And again, it's intended to invest and contribute to arts and culture arts and culture throughout Alaska. So it's really only eligible to Alaska residents who are living in Alaska and who have been here for at least 2 years. And so we say that if you qualify for a PFD, you'll qualify and be eligible to apply for an Individual Artist Award. If you have questions about your residency status, or if something happened outside of your control, please contact us before you apply so we can talk with you about that. And because this is intended to recontribute back to Alaskans and the Alaska economy, artists have to remain a resident for the duration of that grant period. And again, that's 1 year. It is a program intended for adults, so folks have to be 18 years or older, and it is for artists who are currently producing work. So again, talk with us about any questions you have about that. We understand that life gets in the way often, and sometimes there are gaps in practice. So if you have questions about that, please let us know. A few things that would make someone ineligible or would make their application not advance to the panel. And so again, this is for established artists who are already rooted in their practice. And so if someone is currently enrolled in an art degree seeking program under the supervision of an instructor, they must wait until they complete that program. So if someone's working on a bachelor's, master's, or postdoc degree in the arts, that would be an ineligibility because that work is being done under in the supervision of an instructor within an academic setting. And so that person would have to wait until they complete their program. Likewise, artwork that's done under that program would not be eligible, and that artist would have to use work samples that are done in their independent practice. Now, if someone is an artist and they're also working on a mathematics degree, that would be different, and that would not be a barring factor in their application. This is also intended for advancing an individual's artistic practice. So it's not intended for academic or scholarly research. So it can't be for research for an academic essay or academic article, and it can't be for commercial work in nature. We understand there is a commercial process of being an artist, selling work, producing albums, etc. And that's not what we mean by commercial work. By commercial work, we mean apologies, I was just on mute for a moment. Work that might be considered commercial is work that is done under kind of the label of a business. And so one example that we might give for commercial work is a graphic design artist. That would be an eligible discipline, but it's a graphic design artist that works for a design firm, and their project proposal might be to purchase equipment so that they can improve their relationship with their clients and make work for their clients. So that's a very commercial practice, and it wouldn't be rooted in their own individual growth as an artist and growth in their practice. And so if you have questions about the commercial nature of work, please let us know. And then this is also not an emergency or needs-based program. It is a merit-based program, and it's very competitive. Every year we receive anywhere from 300 to 500 applications, and there's 35 awards with 1 Distinguished Artist Award. So it's really, really competitive. And we understand, especially in the last few years, that there is a lot of need, and a lot of need within our communities, a lot of need from COVID. But we wanted to maintain the integrity of this program and keep this program going throughout COVID and our upcoming post-pandemic recovery. And so we're keeping the consistency of the program the way it is, but we do have some other opportunities to share with you. It is also not eligible for artists that are recent award recipients. So if an individual received an award in 2019 through 2021, they must wait they must wait 3 solid years before applying again. So it's a 3 solid year wait period from receiving your award to being able to apply again. And if you've already received an award, work samples from that successful application are not eligible to be reused. in a new application. So the work must be new and created outside of that successful application. The criteria that we want you to think about when drafting your applications are the artistic quality given your experience. And this is really important to consider, especially considering your career stage as an emerging or mid-career or mature artist. The panelists are going to be looking at your work based on how you identify yourself. So they'll be looking at your quality of work based on how you've identified your own career stage. So really thinking about the quality of your work and how you can best present the quality of work. And we'll talk about representation of work samples shortly. Your creative accomplishments thus far in your artistic practice and career. And this just really demonstrates for the panel that you can do what you're proposing you can do in your overall project and proposal. It's a year-long grant commitment. So the panel wants to see evidence and experience that what you're saying you can do in your project, that you are showing that you can achieve this. And then something else to think about as you're drafting your applications is how this project, how this exploration, how this award will impact your growth as an artist. What will achieving or working on this particular proposal, project, fellowship, how will it push you forward in your career practice? And then how thorough is your application? Your application is your opportunity to share with the panelists about your work, why it matters to you, why it's important, and to really paint a holistic picture of who you are as an artist. So really take advantage of the opportunities that you have within the application to share who you are with the panelists. The panelists are a group of really engaged, really passionate, invested individuals in the arts. We work with them and give them training and orientation to what it's like being an artist in Alaska, but still they don't know about you or your practice. So really making sure that you are thoroughly completing your application and presenting the best package of your work is going to be key. And then also making sure that your application is complete and not missing any of the base criteria, because that may result in your application not advancing to the panel. So if some basic components like a required attachment, such as an artist statement or resume or work samples, if those are left off your application completely, your application will not be considered complete and won't advance. So always, always, always double checking, making sure that your application is complete. We also get questions about the panel. Who is the panel? What are they looking for? And so every year we have a new panel of artists, experts, folks who work within the arts and around the arts from across the country to review the applications. And it's a diverse, dynamic group of panelists, and that number varies every year. It's anywhere from a dozen to 15 or 16 different panelists, and they each represent different disciplines. And so the panelists are really looking for the same criteria that we communicate with the artist to present in their applications. They're looking at the artistic quality given your experience, again, based on your career stage, where's your work? They're looking at your creative accomplishments to make sure that they feel like you can accomplish what you say you are going to do in your project. They're looking at how this application, how this project, how this recognition will help you grow as an artist and what impact it will make on your growth, and the thoroughness and completeness of the application. It is an individual artist award application and program. It is investing in your work as much as it is investing in you and your growth as an artist. So really making sure that you're giving a really full, well-rounded, holistic snapshot into who you are as an artist. I also want to make a note before we advance into the more kind of workshop part of our session, is that the foundation is really committed to being responsible stewards of Alaska Native and Indigenous artists and culture. And we believe in creating an equitable ecosystem for the artists that that represent our diverse communities. And so since 2020, we've been working with a cultural content strategist and reviewer to help us review some of these applications that have more cultural content. And we just want to recognize that cultural appropriation and cultural exchange and creative collaboration are topics in our communities that we need to consider. And so real quickly, we just want to acknowledge that cultural appropriation is the inappropriate adoption of customs, practices, ideas of one people or society by members of another who are typically more dominant. And what we see in projects or applications that really represent more of a cultural exchange and responsible creative collaboration is projects that have free, prior, and informed consent, a shared control over process and product, acknowledgement and attribution, respect for cultural differences, and reciprocity and benefit sharing. We recognize that this is a really big conversation and one that we don't have enough time today to go over. And so we are working with the Anchorage Museum to facilitate a panel discussion on cultural appropriation coming up on February 15th. It'll be at noon. It's hosted by the Anchorage Museum and our good friend Hollis Mickey and facilitated by Alice Glenn of Coffee and Co-op. And we'll be joined with Sonia Ginyansaka, Melissa Shaganoff, and Dr. EJR David. And Sonia Ginyansaka is our cultural content reviewer. It's a great opportunity to speak directly with these individuals who are experts in their field and ask any specific questions or questions with any nuance that we may not have the information to respond to. Okay. So I also wanted to share, as I mentioned, some other opportunities that we want to make sure that you are aware of as an artist working in Alaska. So the Alaska State Council on the Arts is one of our dear partners, and there are 3 programs that they fund that support artist work, and that is the Harper Arts Touring Fund, Cultural Collaborations, and Arts in Education. And these are all programs that fund organizations to work with artists, either performing and touring artists, to bring artists across Alaska to communities that would have otherwise had limited access, to partner cultural workers and cultural makers with youth to learn cultural practices and programs, and to support artists in the school's residencies. We really encourage you to reach out to Laura Forbes, who is the Director of Education at the State Council, if you have any questions about these programs and how you can get involved. And then the last opportunity we wanted to make sure that you are aware of is the Adaptation and Innovation Grant Program, also housed by our great partners, the State Council on the Arts. And it was developed as a COVID responsive grant. I mentioned that the Individual Artist Awards is not needs-based or emergency-based, but this program was rooted and developed as a response to COVID and is continuing on as a response to the recovery of COVID as we grow accustomed and move through this new way of being that we're all growing to know. And this program is intended to support artists as they adapt and innovate and grow their practice so they can continue making their craft and responding to the changes in our communities, working with their audiences, and developing new ways of practicing in this new platform and new way of moving through the world. The grants available to individuals are $2,000 grants for a variety of projects, and that scope is very broad, and for arts and cultural organizations up to $10,000. So if you are curious about this, we again encourage you to reach out to Laura Forbes at the Arts Council, who can help you move through this process and let you know if this is something that you'd be eligible for. All right, so just some last minute frequently asked questions. And again, if you've had questions come up thus far, please put them in the chat. I see some folks answering them as we go. And if not, we will capture those and make sure we get you some responses. So again, artists can only apply for one award type, only a project award or a fellowship, only as an individual artist or as a group or collaborative. So that's a really key thing to consider. If you have received an award, so if you are a previous fellowship or project award recipient, you can absolutely apply again, but you must wait 3 solid years before applying. So that's 3 years with no award, and then you can apply again. And the reason why we have that 3-year wait period is we really want to cultivate new artists and emerging artists and encourage folks who have not received an award to apply again. The Individual Artist Award is a taxable income, and though we are not equipped to give tax advice, we encourage you to speak to an accountant or CPA or anyone who helps you with your taxes on how you can navigate this taxable income. And again, we went over what those career stages are. And one note I will say about career stages is that it's really important to pick which career stage best describes where you are as an artist. Sometimes we hear from artists who are solidly in the emerging category, but they want a fellowship. And so they will apply for a fellowship and identify as mid-career, but their work doesn't really demonstrate that. And that can actually be a disservice because, again, those panelists are looking at the quality of your work based on your career stage. So really making sure that there's consistency there. Okay, so the next part of this presentation is to take a deeper dive into some of the application components that you'll be going through as you fill out these applications. And so we're first going to introduce you to the application portal that you will use to fill out the application. If you're filling out that application online, we'll go through the individual components of the application, the narratives, the statements, and the resume, and we'll go through some work samples. I do want to give everyone a heads up that once we get to that narrative component of the application, we will be workshopping one of the questions that is in the application, and we'll be doing that through a breakout room session. Our team member, Karen Lowell, has been behind the scenes busy putting everybody in breakout rooms. So once we get there, we will send you into your breakout room where you will be with a breakout room leader who will guide you through this activity. It's a really great opportunity to start one of the questions on the application and hear from your peers. So I really encourage you to take this opportunity to go into that breakout room session, but we recognize that you may not want to go into a breakout room. And if you are not comfortable going into a breakout room, just stay where you are in the main gallery. We'd love to keep you in this presentation and workshop. And we don't want you to feel obligated to go into that breakout room. But either have a pen and paper handy or have a document pulled up that you can use as in preparation when we get to that activity. Okay, so for the application, to access our application, you can get to it a number of different ways. If you get to our website, rasmussen.org, our main website page has a slideshow of images that just move through. And one of those is the Individual Artist Award image. You may not see that when you get to the website. So just know if you get there and you don't see that, it's okay. It just slides through some other images. You can click on that image, or you can select grants or arts. Or if you already have an account, you applied last year, for example, you can skip all of this and go straight to grants log on. For the sake of this demo, I've selected grants. And when I get to the grants page, I see all of the grant types that are sponsored by the foundation, and I will select Individual Artist Awards. That takes me to the Individual Artist Awards page where I will scroll through and select Project Award and Fellowships, because again, there's Project Awards, Fellowships, and Distinguished Artists, and you want to apply for a Project Award or Fellowship. So this is what you'll see. As a reminder, the online application closes March 1st. I will talk about paper applications momentarily. And I want to draw attention to a few buttons that show up on the right side of your screen. And that's for Apply for IAA, Guidelines for IAA, and Toolkits for Artists. So of course, if you hit Apply, it will take you straight to the online application. If you hit Guidelines, it'll pull up our guidelines, which I recommend you print out and have on the ready as you move through your application. And if you hit Toolkits for Artists, it'll take you to a page where we have a ton of resources, anywhere from how to write an artist statement to basic resume templates to tips on taking really great images through your smartphone. So just a few notes I wanted to make sure you all were aware of. Once you click on to Apply for IAA, If you have not set up your account, you will be prompted to register. At this point, just a reminder, if you can keep your mics muted, thank you. You will be prompted again to register. And this is a really key component of your application. You will want to select either individual artist if you are an artist working on your own, applying for your own project, or art group or collaborative if it is a group or collaborative application. We recognize that there are some groups or collaboratives that are also nonprofits, but for this application, do not select nonprofit. That would be for a different grant program. So if you are a group that's also a nonprofit, please, for this application, select art group. Once you've made that selection, you'll be prompted to go to your dashboard where you can start your application. If you have an open application, if you've applied before, you will see that in the closed application, active, if say you got an award a couple of years ago and you haven't submitted your final report, it'll show up as active, and then drafts if you've ever started an application and didn't finish it. If you've never applied before, this will be blank, which is totally acceptable. Once you've read all of the guidelines, you can start your application. I do want to call a few dates into mind so you can have those on hand. Again, the final drop dead last minute deadline for the application is March 1st at 11:59 p.m. If it's received at midnight, March 2nd, it will be ineligible and it will not advance to the viewer or to the panel, excuse me. We do accept paper applications. Our paper application deadline is coming up really quickly on February 14th. And the reason why the paper application is a little bit sooner is because the paper application has to be manually entered into our system by staff. And we want to make sure we have enough time to reach out to artists by that deadline in case there's anything gone awry. And then a couple of years ago, we also started a draft review deadline. And this is coming up in 2 weeks. As well, on February 14th, it's always Valentine's Day. So that's a date to keep in mind. And this draft review deadline is an opportunity for staff to review your application for completeness. What I mean by that is we're not going to be reviewing your application to give you feedback on your project, but we will be reviewing your application to say, I tried to open up your linked video and it's set to private and it won't open. Or I tried to open up your PDF literary artwork sample and it's a blank document. And if you submit by February 14th and we review it, we can reopen your application and give you an opportunity to correct those errors. And then your application could advance to the panel. If that would happen after February 14th, say you apply on February 28th and your application is missing that basic criteria, it will not advance to the panel. And this happens every year and it's super unfortunate. And so we really, really encourage you to always double check and make sure everything you uploaded is the right document, everything's opening the way it should. And if you do want an extra set of eyes on everything, get it to us by the 14th. So again, once you're ready, hit start your application. And it will mimic everything that you see in the guidelines. So just take a note of the instructions, make sure you've read through everything. All of this is also available in the guidelines. And then once you get through that, start your application and it'll start with a cover sheet. And this is where you select if you're applying as a project award or you're applying for a fellowship, what your career stage is, what your discipline is, and if you're an individual or group. So you'll need to know that off the bat. And then always, always, always double check your contact information to make sure it's accurate and up to date. So if we need to get a hold of you, we have the right email and the right phone number. Next, you will be prompted to know if you are applying as an individual or a group. And this is important because if you are applying as an individual or group, your application might vary slightly. There are some questions that groups have to answer and individuals don't. So real quick, for groups and collaboratives, if you're an individual, you won't see this, you don't need to fill this out. But if you're a group, you must include the name of your group. If it's a short-term time-based project and you don't really have a name for a group, just pick a name for that group for the project. You have to indicate how many of your group members have a lead component or ownership over the direction of the group. For this application, we refer to those as collaborators. They're any members of the group that have any type of leadership or ownership over the vision of the group. And we ask for you to list how many of those individuals there are, and then tell us who those people are and what their specific career stages are as well, and what role they play. This is very important. I mentioned this is an individual artist award. It's an award given to an individual. And so if this group was to receive an award, that project director would be the individual that receives that monetary award and then will be responsible to distribute it amongst the group however they see fit. And these individuals will also be, if they receive an award, they will be required to wait that 3-year wait period. We also know that some groups might have countless members that don't have any type of leadership role, like a 60-person choir with 50 people who come in and out based on the season. So we don't need to know every single person, but we do want to have a general idea of how big this group is. If you have questions, again, reach out to us. Every project is required to submit a timeline, and this is a timeline of proposed activities of that, specifically that year period, and the grant period for this year is July 1st to June 31st. So the projects must, within this grant period, must begin after July 1st. If it's an ongoing project, that's okay. Just include what will happen between that year period of time. And this is another opportunity for the panel to really identify what the thought you've put into making this project happen. And it really demonstrates to them how likely it is that this project will succeed and be achieved. Now, if you are applying for a project award, you will be prompted to include a project budget to the cost of $7,500. It's a flat award. Both the fellowship and project award are flat amounts, $7,500 or $18,000. We do not ask for a project budget for the fellowship. So if you are applying for a fellowship, you do not need to put in a project budget. There is no place for the project budget. So you're not missing anything on your application. It's just not required for a fellowship because the fellowship use is a little bit more broad than the project award. So with the project award, you want to make sure that all of your item descriptions and expenses equal $7,500. If you're curious about what you can include in your budget, because often artists leave out lots of expenses that they can include in their project budget, please reach out to us. And work samples. So this is another component of your application. It's very, very important. It's an opportunity for you to show the panelists your work and to really demonstrate to them what you have done in the past with your work and where you're going with this project. Another key that I want to note for everyone is that each of these text fields need to be filled out. Otherwise, you won't be able to submit your application. You'll be able to move forward and advance in the application. But if any of this is left blank, once you hit submit, you'll have to go back. And if you're hitting submit at 11:59, March 1st, you haven't filled this out, you may miss the deadline. So make sure that you're filling all of these out. And I know that this, especially for someone who's submitting multiple work samples, this is a lot of work, but it's really a great opportunity to give the panelists the information about your work. And then finally, submitting your application. We recommend that you view the PDF so that you can see how everything looks on the page, make sure all of your attachments are there. We also recommend that you work outside of the online portal in a Word document, in notes, in whatever platform you use, and say, cut and paste that work into the system. Even the best online portals like this have tech issues, and we've all experienced unexpected circumstances that interfere with technology, like earthquakes or internet absences. And so we would hate for an application to be disrupted based on a loss of Wi-Fi connectivity or some other factor. So always, always, always save work outside of the platform and cut and paste in so that you make sure you don't lose that work. Spending hours and hours on writing and then losing it is devastating. So once you've reviewed your work, you've viewed the PDF, you've made sure that your work sample's all open, that your statement is there, that your resume is there, everything is to your liking, hit submit. If you save draft, it will save your draft so you can come back to it, but it won't submit your application. So hit submit, and then you'll get notified that your application was submitted and finalized. Okay, so we are coming up to the second part of the application that we would like to walk through, and this is the preparation of the breakout room activity. So I will ping Karen to get ready here and make sure that we're all ready and assigned to our breakout rooms. And so this next part of our workshop is to really go over the writing components of the application and the work samples. And so there are 4 main questions to think about and that you are asked in your application. The first is a really brief 100-word statement, and that's to provide a clear and concise overview of your proposal. This is the first thing that the panelists will read, and it gives them an introduction into your project and into your craft as an artist. So clear, concise, make it really crisp so that once the panelist reads it, they are interested and want to know more. A second question dives a little bit deeper into your project. What will you do if you receive the grant award? What is your project or fellowship focus? This is where you can dive a little bit deeper. You have up 250 words here to describe what you want to do, what your project is, what your fellowship is. What will you do in that year to advance your practice as an artist? And then the third question is, how will this proposal advance or enrich your artistic career or development? This is a growth question. How will this project help you grow as an artist? Sometimes we get tripped up in the artist career language, but really, how will this help you grow? How will this advance, propel you forward, root you further in your practice, etc.? And then fourth, why is your work important to you, your audience, or your community? This is the opportunity to speak to the passion of your practice. The panelists want to hear about you as an individual artist and your work. They want to know why your work matters to you, why you do this work. And we encourage artists to think about this question like you would talk to a dear friend about why your work is important to you. The other components of the application, again, are the timeline, which we went over, and the budget for the project award. Some notes about writing these applications, and these are notes to keep in mind for any type of writing that you're doing for your art practice, is that you want whatever you're communicating to be clear and concise, to get rid of any excess words or any buzzwords or jargon that doesn't really speak to the uniqueness of your practice, that there's consistency in message and also in representation. So if you're talking about pursuing a sculptural practice, but your work samples are all painting, there's inconsistency, and that might create some questions for the panel, that you really speak to the compelling nature of your practice. And what makes something compelling is what makes it important to you, and the panelists can feel that. And then of course, making sure it's complete and thorough. All right, before we move into our breakout rooms, we are super fortunate and so happy to be joined by 2021 Project Award recipient, Mayate Agopian, who received a project award for in the performance art discipline for her work in puppetry. And so I am going to stop our slide presentation so we can spotlight Mayate and hear how Mayate approached this application and this work. Mayate.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me tonight. So I applied a year ago as a as an emerging artist for a project award under the performance art, because I'm a puppeteer using wood and shadow puppetry mainly, and I'm a artist in the school here up in Fairbanks. My goal for this grant was to make sure that I would reach actually the draft review deadline, so the February 14th, because I really wanted to make sure that I didn't forget something silly at the last moment, and that if anything was incomplete, I could get a feedback on that. So that was kind of my goal. It was also a personal goal because I know that it's easy to procrastinate a little bit on this. There's so much to do, there's so much to fill up. And having an earlier deadline was helpful for me then so that in case I couldn't finish up because I still needed some info for videos or pictures, then I knew I could have the extra few days after that. And my cat is talking, sorry. I just have a few points I would like to share with you. First, I really did my homework by doing these workshops and really going through all the toolkits and material and videos that are online. They are really inspiring. There's a lot of people who went and got the grant that speak about that, and that really helped me a lot, as well as all the very specific tools on how to write a specific aspect of it. So that was very helpful. And then to make sure that I would just check all the boxes. What was helpful for me was to download all the questions and then have that on a document and really work outside of the outside of the form and go back and back and back onto it. I put the time. That's my second point. I pretty much took 3 full weeks of just writing the narrative and the different like just writing the content after having ideas and having done my work. It's yeah, but so once I had that and I had a clear idea and I spent that time, I had a few questions. A list of questions, and that's when I reached out, and that was super helpful. It was scary. Sometimes I think we're scared of asking for help, or we have so many doubts, and we think that everybody else don't have doubts, and so we don't know if we can share them. But no, it was very, very important. I got a very big support first by having my question answered. And also because at that point, it was early in the process and I got some feedback and I got some feedback, like important things, like don't undermine your own voice, which really allowed me to go back and work again, like reformulate my text to make my voice a little bit stronger. And so I learned a lot through that process, also by asking the questions. Of course, I had friends reading for proof, all of that before I paste everything into the form. My fourth point is just to choose about the sample when the video and the pictures. That really takes a lot of time. So making sure that this time is allowed into it, because and maybe it depends on where you are in your career, but as an emerging artist, you might not have exactly what you feel you have. It's not enough, or it was done in class, and so you cannot use it. And so all of that, you have to reword some videos. So that really took a lot of time, and it's not too, and yeah, and so that's something it's not just the narrative and the text. But to conclude, it was super intensive. It was really hard work. But when I did it, I was so happy I did it. And it was the first time that I really had spent so much time trying to explain what I wanted to do, why I wanted to do it, and how I wanted to do it. And trying to formulate that and being able to express it concisely and clearly was, for me, actually such an important exercise at that point. And it was, I think, really the first time that I felt like I'm asserting myself as an artist, and now I know why. And if I get the grant, it would be fantastic. But if I don't, I know what I want to do, and I will try again, and we'll see, right? But that exercise is super valuable, and so I hope you'll have, you'll do it, and I'm rooting for you, and good luck, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayate. It's so wonderful and lovely to hear directly from an artist who just went through this experience. And I just want to share a brief excerpt. So this is from Mayate's application. She allowed us to share this, and it is part of her response to that question about why her work is important, and I won't read through it too much, but just real briefly, Maite says that for her, puppetry is important not only as an inspiration and a voice, but also as a tool, and then just describes what she means by that for the panelists. She goes on to say that puppetry is a window into art, culture, science, and technology, and then defines what she means by that. So she's sharing with the panelists why this is important and in painting a picture for them so that they're now invested in learning more about this. I also really liked hearing Maite say after, that there was a practice and benefit in completing this package all together and then releasing it and submitting it. And we hear that from the panelists as well. I think someone might have put in the chat, the Anchorage Museum just hosted a panel forum with 3 of the panelists from last year. And it was a Q&A about their perspective as panelists and what they look for and what their experience was with the award. So we really encourage you to learn from them as well. So as a lead up to our breakout room activity, this is going to be a really quick 15 minutes. We're going to be working on that question that we just saw Maite answer, and that is, why is your work important to you, your audience, and your community? And Maite, thank you again so much for sharing those really important point of views as you developed your application. So in just a few moments, you will be sent into your breakout room where you will be thinking about this question: why is your work important to you, your audience, and your community? We won't have time for everyone to introduce yourselves, but we encourage you to do that in the chat. You will be partnered with a breakout room leader who will introduce themselves and get the room going. And the first part of this exercise is just to do a 3-minute free write. It's a brain dump and a brainstorm answering this question: why is your work important to you, your audience, and your community? It can be totally unpolished bullet points, words, thoughts, just getting out why your work matters. And then the next step is for a volunteer to share what they came up with in that 3 minutes, and for everybody else in the breakout room to respond, to listen to that artist, and then to share with them what they heard that artist say in talking about why their work is important. And it's an opportunity for us as artists to communicate what our message is and what we're trying to say, and then hear back from others on if they interpreted what we tried to communicate appropriately. And we'll just do this activity for as long as we have time for. And again, it's really quick. It goes by really fast. Your breakout room leaders will reintroduce this activity once we get you there. And again, if you're not comfortable going into a breakout room, we don't want to lose you. So please stay in the main gallery and we'll work with you there. So at this point, I'm going to ping Karen. Karen, are we ready to go with the breakout room? We are ready. Okay, I'm seeing folks who don't want to go to the breakout room. You will be sent there, but just ignore it and just stay with us in the main room. All right, Karen, let's open up those rooms. Hello, welcome back. Thank you all so much for going through that breakout room exercise with us. I'm watching our time. We won't have time to hear from you on how that experience was, but we're really grateful for you going on that journey and really trusting us and your breakout room leaders to lead you through that activity. We do encourage you, since we don't have time for a share out, we encourage you to post your experience in the chat if that was helpful, anything that you might have discovered that was new, or any feedback that you have, we'd appreciate it. I also want to note our time. We have this presentation scheduled to go until 7, and we are over time, probably because I talk too much. So we understand if you need to exit at 7 o'clock, but we are committed to sticking this through and having some time reserved at the end for questions. So we're going to push this on another half hour to 7:30 so that we can leave some room for questions and answers if you are able to stay on the call with us. So as you're writing in the chat your experiences, in the breakout room, I just want to move us through some of the other components of the application. And so another element, and this is another opportunity for you to talk about what your work means to you and why you are an artist, why are you making the work, why are you making this work, is your artist statement. It's required either as an upload feature or you can write it directly into the application. And this is the what, the how, and the why of your practice as an artist. We often say a way of thinking about this is, what are you trying to do in your work? What is the what of your work? Why are you doing? And this speaks to that question we just brainstormed. Why is this work important to you? Why are you compelled to make this work? Why are you an artist and not a baker if you're not a baker? And then how are you doing it? What is your craft? It's an opportunity for you to share a holistic view of who you are as an artist. Now, the artist statement should be about your work and your practice as an artist holistically, not specific to your project. The narrative is the opportunity to speak directly to the project. This is about you as an artist. And we always encourage by starting in a very similar way than we did in our activity to really brainstorm the what, the why, the how of your work. And then from that brainstorm, to start to pull out ideas that gel for you and that really speak to you, put those into an outline that you can then start to create a structure, draft those ideas into sentences, edit out, get rid of anything that doesn't really speak clearly about the passion of your work. And then, as Mayate said, proofread it, give it to someone else to read, ask them what their experience of it, ask them if it makes sense and what they got out of it. We always recommend with the artist statement or any of the narrative components of this application to give it to two people, one who is an artist, familiar with your work, and one who is not an artist, doesn't work within the sector, and ask for them to ask for clarity, ask if it was consistent and if they understood what you were trying to communicate. Some statements, and this is the feedback that we've gotten from panelists on statements that weren't that clear to them, and general statements to avoid that don't really speak to the uniqueness of your craft. My work is intuitive. I do art because I have to. That may be true, but it doesn't really give a unique perspective of who you are and what your work is and why you have to do it. Your work is about your experiences. You pour yourself into the work. The work is organic and synthetic. It's a personal journey. These may all be relevant statements, but they're so general, they don't speak to the individual behind the artwork. Now, this is an example of a powerful artist statement. And again, it is from Mayate's artist statement, we are using with permission. And what she's done in this statement is really tap into the passion of her work. What I love about puppetry are its possibilities, its power to touch, open doors, enhance learning, etc. She talks about what it is in puppetry that she loves, that moves her. She goes on to talk about what puppetry means to her. It's music and rhythm, talks about what that means, that it's an inspiration. And by speaking about her work this way, she's engaging the panelists to want to know more. It sparks curiosity. The next piece that's required, and again, this is one of those complete thorough application components, is your artist resume. Now, your artist resume is just a collection of your history as an artist. It should reflect your work progress, any development, training, or education, any activities that you've undertaken as an artist. And it's going to be varied depending on your craft, depending on your career stage, but keep the artist resume specific to your practice as an artist. If you have a separate work resume and your work is not related to your artist practice, do not include that in your resume. Sometimes we get resumes uploaded that are separate work resumes, like someone's pilot experience. If that's not relevant to your art practice, leave it out of your art resume. There's also a CV, which is a comprehensive collection of everything you've done in your art practice. We are not asking for a CV. It's a one-page limit for the artist statement and the resume. That's all the panel is required to read. So keep it, again, concise and succinct, and really only share what is most pertinent to your practice. Some of the basic things you want to keep in a resume is your contact information, your education or training, if you're self-taught, If you worked as an apprentice or you worked under a mentor, you would keep that, how you learned your craft. And then any other element that's relevant to your practice. Is it an exhibition? Is it a performance? Is it a publication? Is it a residency? Anything that's specific to your practice would be your header. And then of course, anything else. If you're a teaching artist, if you have any press or writings about your work, etc. And a basic structure would look like this. Now I've mentioned our artist toolkit on our website. We have 3 blank resume templates that if you wanted to, you could just update and plug in your information. And this is just a basic structure and outline of a resume. They're all going to be different. They may not, some of these headers might not be relevant to you, and that's okay. Just make it individualized. Some of the most common mistakes that we see in a resume are inconsistencies, things that are out of order, information that's missing, such as an artist contact information, or implying something that hasn't happened, implying something happened that hasn't yet, like an exhibition or a degree or a publication, etc. And then again, missing any pertinent information. Now, some of the questions, we get a lot of questions about who our panelists are. And again, these are experts in the field. They're practicing artists, arts administrators, representatives of national foundations or institutions. And they provide a lot of really great insight and feedback into the application process. And these are some of the questions that they have had on applications. And I'll just go through a few of them for sake of time. What specifically are you looking to create? This application did not have the detail in what their project purpose was. And so it left the panelists curious about what they were going to do. What does it mean to you to create a new body of work? So this speaks to that. Why is it important? Why is this work important to you? What does it mean for you now as an artist to do this work? What subjects do you want to work with and explore? And where exactly would you like to travel? So this application included travel, but was not clear about where or how or why. So again, speaking in specifics and really making sure that you're clear in communicating your message and your project really directly to the panelists. And then sometimes we get asked by artists on what's the magic? How do I get to the A? What can I do to get this award? I've applied and applied and applied, and I have not received it. And that's a hard question to answer. We have artists every year who have applied and haven't received it. Prior to my role as a program officer, I was applying for individual artist awards, and I was lucky to receive them, but applied several years and did not receive an award. And one of our fellowship recipients last year applied 11 years consecutively and did not receive a project award or fellowship either of those times, and then last year received the award. So sometimes it's just a matter of it not being your year and not being your panel, and not reflective of your work or the deservingness of this award. And so what we say about where the magic is in drafting your application really reflects back to what Mayate spoke about in preparing her whole application process. You really want to focus on presenting the best and most complete package of your work in a way that allows you to speak to the compelling nature of your practice and your project and what makes it unique. What makes it unique to you? What makes it unique amongst the sea of other applications, amongst your discipline? What is the individual impetus of this project for you? And how can you describe it in a way that is going to make the panelists put a flag on it and say, I want to come back to this application. I have 30 more to go through, but I want to, this stood out to me. I want to come back to it. And also remember that these panelists, they're educated, they're informed, but they're not informed about you as an individual artist. And they're reviewing multiple applications, 30 applications, 40 applications, 50 applications, sometimes more, depending on our turnout every year. And so making sure that your application is clear, concise, and compelling, and so that they know what you want to do and why you're doing it. And then, as Mayate said, once you create that complete package and you feel good about it, hit submit and let it go, and know that you presented your best work. And if you don't receive the award this year, it may just not be your year to receive the award, and there's a new panel, a new process the next year. All right, so real quick, I'll just run through some work samples so we do have time to get to the Q&A. We're going to start with video and audio. So this is for any disciplines that require sound or visual, moving visuals for their work. It might be a video media artist, it could be a dance or performance artist. And the main things that you want to make sure are present in your video or audio samples is focus and clarity of image, of sound, of lighting, that there's a general white balance of neutrality and base lighting across the work, that the sound quality is clear and crisp, and isn't forcing the panelists to strain to listen to the quality. There isn't background noise clouding that. And that this is super important, that what you want the panelists to see is queued up or edited down. So there's a time limit for video and audio work samples. Please, someone put in the chat if I'm wrong. That's a 10-minute time limit for video or audio samples. It can be one sample up to that time or a few different samples of a shorter period. And that's all the panelists are required to view. So either give them that 3-minute, those few samples of 3 minutes or that 10-minute clip, or queue up the time markings for them, because if it's an hour-long work sample, they're not going to view the whole thing and they're not going to know where to start or where to finish, and they might not be seeing what you want them to see. We also want to let folks know that make sure that if you're submitting a video or audio sample, that you're submitting a direct and complete sample of your work and not a reel that is cut of several different few second clips of your work. That doesn't give the panelist an overall perspective of your practice. They want to see a piece, a solid piece in that time limit. So no reels, and making sure it's queued up. I do want to show some samples of work that is not so effective. And this might be obvious, but anything that's blurry or that takes a while to get into focus. And this is a big one that happens every year. If there is a work sample that is linked to YouTube or Vimeo and it is set to private, we will not be able to see it, and neither will the panelists. So making sure that that is either unlisted or public at any point from when you submit your application to when we make the announcement, make sure it's accessible, because these panelists start reviewing the application much sooner than before they meet as a group. I also want to show a couple of really great sound work samples, and I'll just share just a few seconds of each of this. So this first work sample is by the music group Bunnell, and it's a video sample submitted as a YouTube link, and you can see there's nothing going on. It's just an audio sample, and that is totally acceptable as a work sample. It doesn't need to have a moving image. Another work sample that's totally acceptable for audio is just an MP3. So this is just an MP3 from an award recipient last year, Joshua Jeffries. Another really strong audio sample. Another element for submitting an audio sample is something that is a more edited music video, such as this from previous award recipient, Nicholas Carpenter. All of these are totally acceptable audio samples, very clear, very different in their submission, but all totally acceptable. And then we won't have time to share this video sample, but I encourage you to go to this YouTube page. It's Bjorn Olsen, who received an award last year for film and video. It's a very strong, clear work sample that shows great film quality. And then written works. So with written works, and this is anything in the literary arts category or even multi-discipline category, you want to make sure that this is neatly typed out and produced, that you're following the guidelines in terms of margin size and font size, and that you're not trying to submit more pages than are acceptable by expanding the margins or spaces. So really making sure that you're following the guidelines specifically and choosing excerpts. Again, there's a page count and limit. It's up to 15 total pages. So making sure that the excerpts of these works are the excerpts that you want the panelists to read, that give the best window into your project or your your style as an artist, and making sure the track changes are off. So we do get samples like this every year, and this would be a sample that needs some work and needed some proofreading before submission. And some examples of good quality work samples are clean and clear. We have a sample of a novel and a screenplay, and it's just the right excerpt that the artist has given the panelists so they can get a really good picture of that artist's discipline and their practice. Okay, so this is the last of our work sample demo, and then we can get to some questions and answers with images. If you're a visual artist, if you are submitting still images in your work, you might do this if you're a multidiscipline or dance artist or across a craft or folk and traditional. You want to submit images that are presented with minimal distractions in the background. The background is neutral. We say white, black, or gray, that the focus is on the work itself, that there's a natural and neutral light, that it's evenly lit across the image, that the focus is on the work. So if there's distractions, you crop that out. And if you have access to a professional photographer, we recommend that you seek out that resource. We know that that's sometimes a barrier. So we do have in our toolkit online tips for capturing good photos, even with just a smartphone. If a project award, a type of project that would be eligible is working with a professional photographer, if that's something that you needed for your work. So for time, I just want to go through a few of these and show some examples of work samples that wouldn't be great and ones that would be better. And so this is a sample of a work sample of an image that needs some improvement. There's multiple different pieces in this frame. We're not sure what we should focus on. We're not sure if this artist is trying to get beyond the work sample limit by submitting more images than one. And we're not sure if this is in process or if these are finished pieces, if there's one artist or multiple. So we need some more work here. Now, this would be a sample of a good quality image. We see the dimensionality in this work. We can zoom in to get the details. It's pretty evenly lit, even though there is a little bit of a highlight there in the center, and it is very clear and crisp. Now, this one is something that needs a little bit more work because we're not sure if it's finished. We don't know if it's in process. There's a lot of visual distraction. This would be a good image of a detail shot. This artist, if they submitted a second image, we would want to see this from another angle because it is a dimensional piece, but it is a good sample of a close-up detail. And finally, the work sample we'll talk about is this one from artist Susan Joy Scher. Now, this is a good work sample. We encourage folks away from submitting themselves with their work sample, like taking a selfie holding your artwork. That would not be a good work sample, but this is an example of where it's appropriate to include the physical body in the work. The body was required for this piece, that this piece functions as a wearable piece. So it's totally appropriate to have the body and the artist represented in this image. Otherwise, make sure the focus is on your work and not yourself. And lastly, Karen Lowell, our fantastic consultant, provided us with these two samples just to show the quality difference in taking a pretty great quality image with your smartphone and then what it looks like here if it's taken by a professional photographer. So at this point, just a couple of things to keep in mind. We're going to transition over to the Q&A so that we have time to answer some of your questions that have come up. So just some things to keep in mind to wrap up this this workshop component is to think about this in terms of 1 year, both for the project award and the fellowship. Would an external audience have any doubt that you can complete what you're proposing within that year? Is there consistency across your application? Does your artist statement and your resume support your narrative practice? Again, are you proposing sculptural work, but all of your work samples are oil paintings? Making sure there's that consistency throughout. And this is, as I mentioned, as we began, an individual artist award program. It is intended to invest in you as an individual. So if you do have a community focus to your practice, we recognize that many artists are social practice or civic practice artists. If there's a community component to your practice, that's great. but also articulate in your application how it will help you grow as an individual or as a group or collaborative. So again, investing in the individual as an artist. And then how have you articulated what makes your practice or your platform as an artist unique to you? So speaking to that compelling nature of your practice. Okay, so I am going to give you all a break from listening to me talk, and I am going to pass it over to my lovely colleague, Emily Kwan, who will lead us through a Q&A. And we, Rasmussen Foundation staff, is happy to answer these questions. If you have a question that's specific to your community, again, we have our fantastic community partners on the call that can also be available to answer questions. Okay, Emily.
Hello and good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking it out with us within this lovely workshop. Thank you, and Zina, for all the great information. So how this Q&A is going to work is I have collected questions from the chat that were not answered over the course of the workshop. But if you do have a question, please use the reactions button. You can see like a hand raise, or you can always add questions to the chat group, the chat as well. So I'm going to start with the chat. So one of the questions was from Carol Lavando. She asks, what does a consistent body of artwork mean?
That's a great question. And so I think when I talk about consistency across your application and practice, I mean that there's consistency in what you say you're going to do as an artist and then what you're doing. And so if your artist statement is reflecting a body of work that is watercolor, but your narrative is suggesting a body of work that is clay body, and your work samples are showing metal sculptures, there's inconsistency there. So really making sure that it's kind of a streamlined reflection of your body of work. And something that we do want artists to consider in the images and body of work that they're proposing is to think about this as a portfolio that you're showing someone in order. So thinking about the body of work that you're showing the panelists, they're going to click on the first image that you upload first, and that's going to be the introduction to your work. And so how can you curate those images to show the panelists your strongest work or your most relevant work to your project, but thinking about curating your work samples so the panelists are seeing the work sample you want to show first. Carol, does that answer your question about consistency? Oh, and you are on mute.
Carol?
Got it. Okay. Consistent body of work, I was also in reference towards like a subject matter, like let's say landscape. Can you present that in watercolor and metals and stuff like that? Or should you stick, I mean, subject could be all landscapes with different interpretations, or do you need to stick with a specific medium?
I think that's a great question. I think it depends on what your project is and what you hope your work samples are demonstrating to the panel. If what the feedback we've gotten from panelists about work samples that are all varied from each other is that it makes them unsure what the direction of the project is going to be. So if you have a project that is incorporating those mediums, or you're experimenting with mediums, or you're typically working in watercolor and moving towards metal, I think it's totally acceptable to include those work samples, but really think that these panelists are looking at your work samples as a demonstration of where your project can go or what you can do. And so making sure that you're giving them a consistent message. So I think it's absolutely okay to include other mediums in your portfolio of work samples. Just make sure that that is being communicated as to why.
Sounds good. I saw Brian's hand was up. I don't know if he was going to ask about that question, expand on it. Oh, he's muted.
I was actually just moving around. I didn't.
Great, thank you, Brian.
It's very important to move around and get the stretching in. I see Carl Johnson, your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, my camera's out, but so I submitted a project. This was for a fellowship grant once. I specifically said in my narrative that, and I'm a photographer, that the project would have me photographing landscapes, cultures, and wildlife. And I submitted those types of images for my work samples. And one of the feedback from the juror was, well, he all had different subjects in his application, his work materials. He had landscapes, he had wildlife, he had people. And like, that's what the project was about. And it was explicit. And I was dinged for having a work sample that didn't have all landscapes or all wildlife or all people.
Thank you for sharing that, Carl. And, without going back and seeing the specific panelist comments, I can't speak directly to it, but what I can say is, every panelist is different and every panelist perspective is different and unique. And, we communicate with the panelists about the importance of submitting feedback to the artist that is constructive and helpful and positive and helps to improve the application process as a whole. And, sometimes the comments might not be as helpful as intended. So, we encourage you to reach out to us and we can go back through your panel and see if there's anything, or go through your application and the panel feedback a little bit more thoroughly offline.
Does that answer your question, Carl?
I wasn't asking a question. I was just speaking to my experience about my experience of what one panelist thought a consistent work sample should look like, a consistent body of work. They all wanted all the same subject matter, not the same medium.
And again, every panelist is different and every panelist brings their own point of view. And, as an artist, I've received lots of panel feedback and I've received feedback from some panelists that was way off and didn't get what I was trying to do. And sometimes that happens and it never feels great. And, we really encourage you to keep applying and, it's up to artists too, to, maybe take some of this panelist feedback into consideration. And sometimes it may not align with our work and that's okay. And we can just pass over that specific feedback.
Awesome. So next question. Oh, Sylvia, your hand is up.
Yeah, I have a question. So I submitted last year and I want to do the same project, even because I wasn't able to do it last year, more likely because of COVID and because I was turned down, but also I could have maybe done it a different way, but because is there anything wrong with just submitting the same application again? I could tweak it with the dates and maybe put a couple different more current work samples, but I still want to do the same project. So I'm wondering if I could, and the feedback was good. I just didn't get selected, but they all said good things. So I thought, I'm just going to submit again.
Yeah, absolutely, Sylvia. You can submit the same project. The panelists change every year. And, we encourage you to make sure you're refreshing your work samples. And if your project has changed, or if there's any feedback that you've gotten from peers or other folks who have reviewed your project, that might help strengthen it, to always do that. But you can absolutely submit the same project. We've had artists do that. One of the fellowship recipients that received an award this past year, she had applied the previous year for the same project and it wasn't selected that year. So we do see that from time to time, and it's really your perspective as an artist. Karen, do you have anything to add to that? Oh, Karen, you are on mute.
Sorry. I think it's okay to if you have a project that you've been wanting to propel forward over time, I think it's completely okay to reapply. I would just not submit the exact same application. You know, time marches forward and you want to like address the changes that have happened. But yeah, I think that's completely okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to highlight there have been a couple of budget questions, one of which is from Summer Coaster. They're saying, oh, I'm wondering how artists applying for the project grant have been able to make their expenses total up to $7,500 exactly. What if it's less? What if it's more?
Great question. So if it's less, talk to us, because we would suspect you're not capturing all of the expenses that go into your art practice. And you know, one of the notes we hear from the panelists often is how generous artists are in paying other people, but how they forget to pay themselves. So that's part of your budget, is funding your own art practice. And so if it's coming under $7,500, talk to us about that. It is a $7,500 grant and the budget must meet that. If it exceeds $7,500, that's fine. The budget line, budget category must still equal $7,500, but in your project narrative, just indicate, you know, this is a $10,000 project. This project request is for $7,500. I will make the difference up this way, or the remaining funds will be, I will fund myself, or etc. So if it exceeds that $7,500, just let the panelists know how you're going to make that gap of funding. If it's under $7,500, talk to us. If it's much smaller, there might be a different grant opportunity that's more applicable to your particular project. But if you're just curious about what you can include in that budget, reach out to us at Arts@Rasmussen and we can work with you one-on-one.
Awesome. I see someone's hand up. I apologize if I didn't say your name. Kindu Win? You want to unmute? Oh, did we lose
Kinduane.
Oh,
Yes, thank you. Kinduane, US Sauk. I have a question. I do see that the application period or the application age is for 18 years old and up. And my question is, if there is a dance group and a leader who is over the age of 18, would they still be able to submit an application in working with the group that involves youth as the group collaborative, or do all the group members need to be 18? That was the one question I have for that.
That's a great question. We do get that a lot. And with the group and collaborative, all members of the group have to be 18 and older because it is an award for adults 18 and over. It wouldn't prohibit you from applying as an individual artist, but you wouldn't be able to apply, the group would not be able to apply as a group or collaborative unless all members were above 18. And that's true for any of the criteria. They all have to be Alaska residents, have been here for 2 years, remain for a year. So unfortunately, that is a limitation in this particular award. Okay,
Thank you.
it looks like we're
that you're taking to help all of the artists with this. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, it looks like we're over 7:30. So Emily, maybe just one more question.
Yes, so I found a pretty striking question. So the question is, I don't believe the person is here anymore, but they did ask, what are they looking for as an example of how the grant will help me grow as an artist?
So I wish I could give a really flat, direct answer, but it's going to depend on you as an individual artist, where you are starting with your practice, what you are trying to accomplish, and how will this project help you get there. So it's super individualized. And the panel just wants to see that there will be progression in your practice, that this will push you either further in your craft to help refine your craft as an artist, or help you take under new exploration and grow in that way. Karen, I'm going to bounce it to you to see, Karen is our fantastic consultant that works directly with artists, and I'm sure has addressed this question before.
So I'm just going to say, it's like if you have any questions at all about this process or how this works or what you can do to strengthen your application, please let us know. Okay. It's arts@rasmussen.org. And you can also just email me directly at klowell@rasmussen.org. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think just thinking about your stage as an artist, where you are once you submit that application and where you see yourself, think ahead. If you were to get this award after a year, where will you be? Is it for a residency? And then what will being on that residency expose you to as an artist? Is it for a first exhibition? And then what will that first exhibition do for you as an artist? Is it taking different workshops to strengthen your craft as a carver? Fast forward to a year and where you would be at the year end of this project, and then think about the growth that you would do across that time and communicate that to the panel. That's what they would be looking for. Okay, with that, I know we didn't have time to get to everyone's questions, and we're just so grateful that you stuck it out with us. And we really, really encourage you to reach out to us at arts@rasmussen.org. We do want to get to all the questions that came up. So please feel free to just plug those questions in an email right now and send them over to us, and we'll make sure we get an answer to you. I just have the hold screen on some really fantastic resources, both local and national, that we want to make sure you're aware of that can help you with this process and in any other part of your professional practice as an artist. We thank you so much for your time and attention today, and we are really, really looking forward to your applications this year. As a reminder, that drop deadline is March 1st, and that paper application deadline and draft review deadline is February 14th. Thank you all so much, and thank you to the Rasmussen Foundation team on the call for making everything work smoothly, and for our fabulous co-hosts and arts and culture community partners. Thank you for the work you do. Good night, everyone.